Good morning, Morai Rabotai. We're continuing on Sechet Chagigah and Daf Hey Amud Aleph 5a. Limud of Amud Yomi has been dedicated for this month anonymously for the Hatzlacha B'nei Achavura, and we are 12 lines down from the top of the Amud. We are in the middle of Agadic, beautiful Agata Gemaras, and the theme of the Agatas has been the psukim that made different Amoraim very emotional, brought them to tears, and started as really digression from the mitzvah of Re'iyah that has been really the core concept that the Gemara has been dealing with of shalosh pa'amim b'shana yira'eh kol zechulcha, and we started from there digressing into Agatas, and now we are in middle of the psukim that brought Rabbi Yochanan to tears. The first of which was the Gemara said Rabbi Yochanan would cry when he would get to the pasuk of Vatesiteni bo lebaleo chinam, which we mentioned is speaking about Iyov after the initial plagues that he got. When one Rosh Hashanah, Hashem said, look at how proud I am from my Eved, my servant Iyov. Look at how beautiful he serves HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how beautiful his life is. And Satan said, of course, you've given him everything. Take some away and see how he will react. And Hashem tested him because of that. He was persuaded, so to speak, by Satan and took away all of his wealth, all of his children, and so on, Rahman al-Itzlan, and Iyov was still holding strong and shining even better. And in the second Rosh Hashanah, so to speak, Hashem tells Satan, look at this. He's still holding strong, and you persuaded me, you convinced me, you moved me from my decision against my better judgment, so to speak, against him for no reason, chinam. And Rabbi Yochanan will say, an Eved that his master could be persuaded against him for no reason. Does he have any hope? His case is hopeless. So this is, of course, we explained a little bit of the backdrop of the story of Iyov in the beginning of Masechet Baba Batra. Who Iyov was he one of the Ole Bavel? After they came from the Galut, was he in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, or maybe even was not a real personality? The question that the Shagadaria in Ture Even asks over here, a very valid question, says, wait a second. We know that the Midrash that Rashi brings on Chumash by Bilam and Yitro is that there are three advisors of Paro that they advised him on the decision of whether or not he should be enslaving the Jews and killing the babies and so on and so forth. And Yitro said good about them and said, no, don't do it. He merited to, and he had to run away, of course. He merited to be the father-in-law of Moshe Rabbeinu and so on and so forth. And Bilam, who advised against them, was killed, and Iyov, who kept quiet, he had to go through Yisurim. So it's not so much for chinam. It's not for no reason. Chazal seem to indicate that it was for a reason, right? On the other hand, over here, the Rabbi Yochanan himself, who is the one that would be crying when he would read this psukim, he is of the opinion in the Gemara in Masechet Baba Batra that we mentioned that Iyov was not that personality that was advising Paro. He rather was one of the Ole Bavel. He was one of the people who came from the exile back, which is hundreds of years afterwards. So therefore, is not necessarily questioned the Shita of Rabbi Yochanan with that challenge, because he holds that Iyov was actually a righteous man that was not ever an advisor to the Pharaoh of Egypt in time of Moshe Rabbeinu. So that really reconciles the problem. But again, without this loop, you would have a serious question to deal with. So says the Gemara. So that was the first pasuk that brought Rabbi Yochanan to tears. Now the Gemara says other psukim that made Rabbi Yochanan very emotional. Rabbi Yochanan kimati lahai krabaki, 12 lines down. Hen biktoshav lo yamin, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not even trust his holy individuals. So says the Gemara, if Hashem does not trust his holy ones, ibikdoshav lo yamin, beman yamin. If the holy ones he does not trust, who does he trust? So then he had a story of the Maise that really made him understand this psukim a little bit better. Yom Achad, one day, Havaka Azil be'urcha, Rabbi Yochanan was going on a path. He saw this fellow that was busy picking te'anim, picking figs, and he was doing something that people would not necessarily do. Usually, figs, the Gemara elsewhere says that you have all kinds. On one tree, you could have ripened ones every day. Some of them ripen, and there are other ones that could be not ripen at all. So this individual was doing exactly the opposite of what me and you would do. Instead of going through all the figs and picking the ripe ones, he was going through the figs, picking the ones who were not ripe. So Rabbi Yochanan says, wait a second. Maybe there's some health issues, some research that came out from the doctors that this one is better. Isn't it better to take the ripe ones? Why are you taking the ones that are not ripe? So says the Gemara. Aren't the other ones better? He said, no, you don't understand. I am going on a trip, a long, long trip, and I have to take food with me. If I take the ripened ones, they're going to go bad very quickly. They're going to rot away. But if I take the ones that are not ripe yet, until they ripen and they start the process of decomposition, so to speak, and rotting away, it takes much longer. So that's exactly what I want. I want food for a long, long time from now. And says Rabbi Yochanan, Hani natran, Hani lo natran, these ones I could keep for a longer time, he says. The other ones I can't. Amar Rabbi Yochanan said, Hainu dichtiv hem bektoshav lo yamin. Now I understand what's the pshat in the pasuk of hen bektoshav lo yamin. It doesn't mean that Hashem doesn't trust any of the kedoshim, any of the tzaddikim. What it means is sometimes you have a person that's very young, and he is kedoshav, he is a holy person, he's a good person, but he is not safe because he's about to do something wrong maybe. So Hashem sometimes takes him earlier in order to make sure that he does not go astray. So now we mentioned this before in other Gemarot about Metushelach, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the righteous person that was then Veitalech, Chanoch and HaElokim, he went with Hashem, and Enenu, and he's not the Kilekach Elokim. And Chazal say that took him away because he should not be drawn to go straight off the path. So you have such a reality that a person could be taken away in young age because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to make sure that they die innocent and pure and not to go off the path in that way. We spoke about this in Ben Soreru More as well. The Chazal say, well, this guy for sure is going to go astray, so better mutav she'amud zakai v'al yamud chayav.
Wouldn't an early taking and early fasting infringe on the bechira and eventually teshuva?
Yes, it does. In other words, what you're asking is a very good question. It's partially also what we spoke about yesterday of what happens to the years that he was supposed to have. Yes, yesh nispeh velo mishpat, which was the other pasuk that we discussed of someone going without a proper judgment. Sometimes the override of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that would basically take a person off in an attempt, in this case, in an attempt to make sure that they're not going to go off the path of being a righteous individual. Now, that by itself is a very big question, because you see, Hashem judges a person based on what they are now. You see it by Yishmael, you see it elsewhere, and over here Hashem is trying to judge this Ben Soreru More, young under bar mitzvah boy, based on what he's going to become in future. That, of course, is something deep and wide that has to be discussed by itself. But nevertheless, Rabbi Yochanan said, well, that's what it's talking about. It's not talking about like an older individual that's kadosh, that is holy, that most of his years have already passed him by, and he's still standing and holding strong, but rather a younger person that may or may not, based on his nature, may be in danger of going astray. So the Gemara says, is that true? We know a story that there was this Talmud, the youngster, the Hava Beshivavute, the Rabbi Alexandri. He was in the neighborhood of Rabbi Alexandri, and he died young. Ve'amar, and Rabbi Alexandri said, if he would have wanted, he could have lived longer. That means it was his fault that he was not a tzaddik. He could have been better and he would not die, right? So says Gemara, if what you just said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan is correct, Dilma mehen bit koshav lo yamin hava. Maybe the reason that Hashem took him young was not because he was not good enough, but on the contrary, maybe he was one of those people who was kedoshav, who was the holy ones that Hashem wanted to protect so badly, so he took them early because they were so perfect. So how do you know that he was so imperfect and that's why Hashem took him? Maybe exactly to the contrary, maybe he was really perfect. So what do you say? Why did Rabbi Alexandri say that if he would have wanted, he would have lived longer, which indicates that he was sinning, and if he would have stopped sinning, he would not die? Maybe it was because he was not sinning. Exactly the opposite, says the Gemara. No. This one was pretty clear to Rabbi Alexandri, because Hahu meba'et v'rabotav hava. This student, this Talmud, this youngster was a very disrespectful person, was not a good person in a way that he would look at the outside even and he would say a perfect individual. He actually saw a very imperfect person. So certainly was not one of those who me and you would think would be part of the hen bekdoshav lo yamin. Says the Gemara. We're not done yet with Rabbi Yochanan. Another pasuk that would drive Rabbi Yochanan to tears. Yeah.
I have a question. So it sounds like right now we're talking about how the kid would pass away at a young age, but yesterday we were talking about how someone would pass away by accident. The angel of death would take them by accident. And it said, okay, now since I already took that person, this person will now be with me. There's two different things, right?
Two different things. Correct. Two different things. And the truth of the matter is, and we have alluded to this before, the Ramchal, when discussing in different svarim of his, including the more direct ones, which is easier to understand and less Kabbalistically mentioned, is in Dat Tvunot Chelek Aleph. He discusses 5 different potential reasons why you have bad things happening to good people and vice versa, and is not discussing any given individual, but in general, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's pathways are pretty covered from us in even what he calls Hanhagat Schar V'Onesh, certainly in the second underlining Hanhaga direction that HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes in his world, which the Ramchal calls it a Hanhaga of Gilu Yichud, which is an undercover decision of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how he moves the entire Beriah, entire creation towards the perfection that he wants from the world eventually, and so on. So there are different elements that could be in action, even by one individual. Could be this plus this plus this, but certainly there are 2 different things, this one and the previous one that we studied yesterday. Says the Gemara, another pasuk that would bring Rabbi Yochanan to tears would be Rabbi Yochanan kimati lahai krabachi vekaravti alechem lemishpat va'ayiti ed memaher b'mchashafim ubimnaafim ubanishpaim lasheker ubeoshke schar sachir. The Hakadosh Baruch Hu says, I will come close to you, I will draw close to judge you, to mishpat, the pasuk in Malachi, and I will myself not just be the judge, but I will be an ed, I will be testifying, I will be the witness as well, but mechashvim, with those who practice witchcraft, kishuf, ubimnaafim, those who are involved with snut, banishpaim lasheker, those who swear falsely, those who withhold the schar of sachir. So it says the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan would cry when he would get to this pasuk. Why would that be? Rabbi Yochanan would say, "Eved sherabo mecharvo leduno," an eved that his Rebbe, his master, would come close to judge him, and he would be hasty to testify against him. So that sounds pretty much like someone with an agenda. That goes, if Hashem wants to go against any person, judge any person, and we're talking about like fair judgment, no one stands a chance. David HaMelech says this. David HaMelech says, V'al tavi b'mishpat et avdecha Hashem, please do not bring your servant me to judgment, to pure judgment. Ki lo yistak lefanecha kol chai. Because nobody, we mean Moshe Rabbeinu, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, nobody would be coming out a tzaddik in front of your judgment if you are really judging, trying to dissect everything and judge with pure judgment without mixing of midat rachamim. Nobody would stand the judgment. That's what David HaMelech says. Now the Gemara does not bring that, but that's basically what it means. That if Hashem wants to judge, you see, he's running to testify against a person and judge them. Rabbi Yochanan says, you have a scenario like that, you stand a chance. No chance. You stand no chance in front of that type of a judgment. And he will cry. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai would say, Oy lanu sheshakal alenu akatuv kalot kechamurot. Now, the Gemara is going to go through, once we mention this pasuk that Rabbi Yochanan would cry, the Gemara itself is going to mention 3 different drashot that different Amoraim and Tanaim made on this pasuk, this very pasuk. The first one is, as we mentioned, the pasuk in Malachi compares different averot together by mentioning examples of what Hashem is going to rush to mention in his judgment. So one was mechashfim, bamenaafim, people who are involved with witchcraft. These are heavy averot, right? Menaafim, people who are immoral, promiscuity. Obanishpaim lasheker, that the Gemara says the world shook when Hashem said, Lo tisa Hashem, Hashem Elokecha Hashem. These are all heavy things. And then next to it, he mentions Ubeoshke schar sachir, someone that doesn't pay a person on time. Right? That means you hire a Jewish guy to work for you, and he says, okay, I'm done for the day. Can you pay me? He says, tomorrow. Right? And you have money in your pocket, and you postpone it one day only. That's oshke schar sachir. Now there is, once we're mentioning this, by the way, it's important, something that people don't realize. There is a lav and there's a asay, right? The asay is biyomot iten scharo. That when someone finishes a job, right? It could be someone that you hire to read Megillat Esther, right? And they finish, and you're busy in the mitzvot of Purim, running around, and you don't pay them that same day. You pay them Motzai Purim. It's already night. The day passed. You lost on the mitzvot asay, on the positive commandment of biyomot iten scharo. In its day, in his day, you should pay him his schar. right? That even if he doesn't ask for his money, you will be not in transgression, but you missed the mitzvah taseh. But then there's a lo taseh of oshkei schar sachir, that you should not wait the day to pass. If he asked already for his money and you have the money to give and you're delaying it, then you will be in a transgression of a lo taseh. So that is something that it's a law in the Torah, but it's a lighter one. It's not like comparing this with promiscuous acts of an eshet ish, of ni'uf, and with mechashvim ubenafim and nishpaim lasheker. So Rabbi Yochanan Darshan says, see, the pasuk is putting these together. The juxtaposition of the comparison of these averot is pretty severe. Says Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, "Oy lanu, woe to us, sheshakal alenu hakatuv kalot kechamurot." That Hashem sometimes equates some of the kalot, what we think is kal in our eyes, right? Who in the crowd over here would think that oshkei schar sachir, delaying a payment one day, will be compared to niuf? And you see that the pasuk does compare them. So this therefore says Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, woe to us that we have to deal with this kalot kebachamurot, because Hashem looks at them in the same light. Sensitivity to other people, to their efforts, and to pay them on time, and so on and so forth, in the eyes of Hashem is very important. So says the Gemara, Amar Reish Lakish, the second drasha, Kol hamateh dino shel ger keilu mateh dino shel mala. A person that is insensitive and tilts the din, the judgment of a ger, of a stranger, is tantamount of tilting against HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, umati ger umati ketiv, in the pasuk, the same pasuk that we just mentioned in Malachi, the full pasuk reads like this: V'ha'iti ed memaher b'mchashafim ubimna'afim ubanishpaim l'sheker. So right after that, it says, "Schar sachir almana v'yatom." He brings the widow and the orphan, umate ger velo yiruni, and they tilt the mishpat, the judgment of a ger, and they are not afraid of me, says Hashem. Now, if I would want to write this pasuk grammatically correct, I would write umate, memtet hey. But the pasuk does not write it grammatically correct, quote unquote. It writes mati with a yud at the end, memtet yud, which would sound like Hashem is saying, you're tilting me, mati, tilting me. So says the Gemara, any person that is insensitive and not careful in the mishpat of a ger, who would be Hashem considering it tantamount to tilting against him. Umati ger umati ketiv, with a yud, and therefore said Reish Lakish, kol hamateh dino shel ger keilu mateh dino shel mala. That's the second drasha. Amar Rav Chanina bar Papa, kol ha'oseh davar umitcharet, was a famous Gemara, one of the all-time famous ones, that any person that does an avera, umitcharet bo, and he has real remorse, he has real feelings of regret that he has ever come to do such a thing, genuine regret and remorse, mochalin lo miyad, immediately HaKadosh Baruch Hu forgives that avera, immediately. Shenemar, the source of it is from this pasuk also. Shenemar velo yiruni. The end of this pasuk says, you do all of these things, velo yiruni, and you have no feelings. You have no feelings of fear and reverence and remorse that you're doing this averod in front of me, says Hashem. And said Rav Chanina bar Papa, what do you learn from this? That if you would be yiruni, if you would be afraid of me, if you would feel remorse and regret, hayiruni mochalin lahem, I would have immediately stopped the judgment and I would have forgiven them. Miyad, immediately. So those are the three drashot that we have. Now we're still not done with Rabbi Yochanan. So far, three. So we mentioned this before, that Hashem forgiving right away and process of fixing the avon that you did are two separate coexisting items. And Rambam writes both of them. Rambam, on one hand, writes in the beginning of Ilchot Shuvah, what you just mentioned, that you could have an Averah with Chilul Hashem that really takes a long time to remediate and fix. But on the other hand, you have the Rambam, I think it's in Perek Zayin of Ilchot Shuvah, that he writes that immediately after you do a proper tshuva, you are beloved, you are wanted, you are close to Hashem, karov, nechmad, ahuv, and so on and so forth. And the Brisker Rav says that the relationship that you had with Hashem that was broken is restored immediately. Immediately Hashem loves you, and is also mohel. If you have these feelings, you have to go through a process of putting the pieces together sometimes, depending on how much damage you have created in the reality of the spiritual world. But nevertheless, mochalin lahem miyad. Says the Gemara. Rabbi Yochanan, and again, of course, you could understand this Gemara, that this Gemara is not talking about those who are more severe. It's talking about an Averah that is one of the mitzvot aseh, which the Rambam says, enozaz misham atshemu chalinoto, and using this psukim as well. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan, the fourth item that will bring Rabbi Yochanan, you move him to tears, ki mati lahaikra bachi, he would cry. Ki et kol maaseh ha'elokim yavi b'mishpat, all of the maasim that a person does, all the deeds, all the actions Hashem brings to judgment, al kol ne'elam, on everything that's ne'elam, that's covered. Now, simply understanding this pasuk means even those things that nobody sees, ne'elam is covered. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will bring to Mishpat. Hashem sees everything, right? The cameras are everywhere. Ayin ro'eh ve'ozen shomat v'chol ma'asecha b'sefer nichtav. That's the simple. But there is another thing. Ne'elam means he'elem davar. That means it was covered from you, which we call them shgagot. You did an avera b'shogeg. You didn't realize that this thing was asur on Shabbat, or you forgot that it's Shabbat altogether, and you did something that you would have known it's asur had you remembered that's Shabbat, but you forgot that it was Shabbat. That's shogeg. Two elements. And says Rabbi Yochanan, Hashem brings everything to judgment, even al kol ne'elam, even on those things that are shgagot, that were unintentional averot, so to speak.
But not to the same degree.
Evet, of course not. But yeah, nevertheless. Evet shirabo shokel lo shkagot kizdonot. An evet that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, his Rabbi, his master, weighs down and counts his shkagot even. Kizdonot, that Hashem considers the averot that he did, even the ones that he did unintentionally. And once you ask this question, the Gemara says, a Talmid Chacham, Na'asulo shgagot kizdonot. Hashem considers the shgagot, even those things that he didn't know, as though he knew, and he went against Hashem to do it. Why? Because he should have known. You have to be responsible. You're a frum person. You come to Amud Yomi. What's your excuse not to know? Right? You have to know the things. Right? So it says that Talmid Chacham is expected much more than a regular person. The higher madrigat you have, there's more, of course, expectation. There's a more delicate relationship to be kept. You see, there's certain things that if your friend would do, you would just overlook. But if your best friend would do, there's something that comes with that relationship. Well, nobody is going to say, well, so therefore let's not have any best friends. That would be foolish. There's so much good that having a best friend comes with, but it also comes with a certain responsibility. You have to be more sensitive. It says, you have to know that this hurts my feeling. Other people don't know, but you're my best friend, so you're closer to me. There's more expectations. That's another element in parentheses that exists over here. But nevertheless, even for regular people, even the shkagot, even though that they're much more light, but still is something that's counted. It says the Gemara, Eved shirabo shokel lo shkagot kizdonot takana yeshlo. He stands a chance. He will cry. Yeshlo, my al kol ne'elam. Now the Gemara asks, what does it mean al kol ne'elam? Because it doesn't say al ne'elam. It doesn't say Hashem brings the things that are covered from you to judgment. It says al kol ne'elam, which indicates that there are things that you would think they are not part of this, but they're really part of this, right? What do you mean al kol? All of the covered ones, which kol is coming for inclusion of other things that you would have thought probably are not part of this that Hashem is adding in. So what's al kol ne'elam? Amar Rav, a person has to be so sensitive to other individuals' feelings. And you want to know what the judgment of Hashem is to sensitivity, the expectation of being sensitive to other people's feelings. It could be as small as you kill a bug in front of your friend in a way that he gets disgusted. That is considered an avera ben adam lechavero. Wow. You made your friend disgusted. You made them, and you could have done it in a different way. That's considered being insensitive to someone's feeling. The Shmuel says, someone that has mucus and spits it in front of his friend, and the friend becomes disgusted with it. It's not a pleasant thing. That's being insensitive. And this is nowadays for sure people are sensitive to these things. If this is even the time of the Gemara, which this was considered somewhat of a norm, we had just in the previous Gemara, in the previous sugya that we learned, in Masechet Brachot, the concept of spitting in the shul is mutar, is not mutar, harabayit, right? But this is in front of another person. If it's in front of another person, forget about the shul, forget about the harabayit. You could be anywhere, and you do it in a way that is not pleasant, is not sensitive. By itself, is considered something that's going to be a part of a person's judgment. Says the Gemara, "My im tov imra." The end of the Gemara says, the end of the pasuk rather says that you're doing this. Hashem is going to bring the judgment. Al kol le'elam im tov imra. Whether it's good, whether it's bad. So I said, what does it mean? Whether it's good, whether it's bad. If it's bad, I understand. What do you mean Hashem is going to judge it even if it's good? What does that mean? Says the Gemara, Amri deber Rabbi Yanai. The Bet Midrash of Rabbi Yanai, Darshan explained this pasuk. Ze anoten tzedakah la'ani befarese. You could be doing something good, but it's going to have a fringes, a side effect, so to speak, that's negative. How? You're giving a tzedakah to ani, but you're giving it so publicly that he gets ashamed, he gets embarrassed. So you're doing a great act of tzedakah, but you're doing it in an insensitive way. So the good act, even though the act itself was good, you'll have accountability for the way you did it because you were insensitive in the way you did it. Rabbi Yanai saw this individual that pulled out a dollar bill like this in front of people and went and gave it to the ani, right? Priding himself and publicly giving it to him. And he said to him, Amaleh, mutav de lo yavadle. It would have been much better if you didn't give any tzedakah to this person. Mehashta de yavadle, from now that you did give it to him, but you embarrassed him publicly in front of everybody. The Rabbi Shila Amri, obviously this is not including a person that is like, let's say, a shluchad rabara, and someone that already has brought himself to publicly ask. There are many people who are very much in need, but they have still a certain image, and you have to keep on that image. Someone that already goes around asking people or demanding from people, so that's, of course, when you give them in front of people when they come to ask, that's not considered this Gemara. But again, hakol b'fi ha'inyan, that's why you have to have so much chokhmah in the way you do the mitzvot. This is what we call the fifth chelik of Shulchan Aruch. The fifth chelik of Shulchan Aruch is, the fifth volume is how to do the 4 volumes of Shulchan Aruch, the 4 chalakim, how to apply them, how to do them in every scenario, in every situation. Really, that is tremendous chokhmah that the person has to develop. So says the Gemara, The Beth Midrash of Rav Shila would say a different shot. They would say, exactly the opposite. If you're giving tzedakah to a woman, but you do get so hushed up, someone sees this scene that you're slipping some money to this woman, their mind may go to the wrong idea, to get the wrong ideas. That, you're helping her, but you're ruining her reputation in that way. So therefore, that's also not a positive way of doing it. Because you're bringing suspicion on this woman and ruining her reputation. Rabbi says, this is a person that sends a chunk of meat right before Shabbat on Friday to his wife, and now the wife is going to think, oh, probably if my husband is sending it now, it means that he already has done the salting and the nikur and take the gidan nashe out and all that, and she's just going to cook it like that, and you may come to a lot of problems. So you're doing a good thing, but you're doing it in a way that is very much not thought out. The Gemara asks an obvious question, so basically, but Rabbi himself used to do this. Rabbi himself would do this to his wife. So how can he say that this is wrong? No. Shani bat Rav Chisda, you remember who the wife of Rabbi was. Rabbi's wife was the daughter of Rav Chisda, and she was really on top of her game. So the Kimle Begava, he knew that she's going to be on top of this, and the Bikiyah, she was a Baki, she was very well versed in all of this, and it would not come to any situation of negativity. Be'ezrat Hashem, we will continue this in the days to come. Have a wonderful day.